Welcome to SEC Football Live here from the 440 Sports Network. I am Braden Gall, brought to you, of course, by ML Rose. 6 great locations across Middle Tennessee. A 7th one coming soon to my neighborhood, which is near and dear to my guest's heart, Joe Rexrode, my favorite media member in all of Nashville sports. Joe, good morning, sir. How are you? Live from Destin, Florida at the SEC meetings. What is up?
What's up? Now, there's no way that's true. That's very nice of you to say, but I'm not your favorite media member.
You are positionless sports media. You are like a linebacker who also comes off the edge, who also can drop into coverage, who plays safety. You can play off ball.
Little special teams.
Absolutely. You're sideline to sideline guy too. Like, you are, hey, don't tell anybody. Nobody's listening. It's okay. You're my favorite media member in Nashville. I'm just saying.
Okay, thanks. Well, you're mine, so there we go. Mutual Admiration Society.
There you go. The only thing I like more than you, Joe, is ML Rose burgers and craft beer, of course. That all over the mid-state area. So if you're a fan of another team in the SEC and you're in town, please check it out. Whether it's baseball, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, we got you covered. Great craft beer, local craft beer selection, as curated by ML Rose. They take a lot of time and care to make sure those taps are fantastic for all of you out there. And the burgers are fantastic as well. They got a great happy hour on Saturdays and Sundays. So if you're watching SEC sports and you're in town, make sure you check out ML Rose, Joe.
Oh, big fan. Yeah. And I did not know there was one coming to East. That's exciting.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? My 8-year-old and wife will never let me forget. We drive by it all the time. The sign's up. It's ready to go. Nice. So it's opening. Actually, it's opening very, very soon. Maybe next week or so. Don't hold me to that. Anyway. All right. So you're live in Destin there. And I just want to ask first and foremost, what is the general vibe? How many of these have you covered? What is it like to stalk athletic directors and coaches in the lobbies of hotels on their pseudo vacations?
Yeah, I've never done this one. And it's so I've done the Big Ten previous version of this in Chicago. And that was very much like you just sit in hallways, like they're going into this room on this floor, and you just, hey, Kirk Ferentz, Joe Paterno. I remember it was actually.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, all this stuff going on with Jim Tressel.
Ironically, Kirk Ferentz still very much a football coach during all of these conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's probably the one guy who's still around. But I remember, Jim Tressel's going through all the tattoo stuff, and Doug Lesmerises, my buddy who at the time covered, was a columnist for Cleveland.com. Jim Tressel kind of comes around the corner, gets in the elevator. Lesmerises goes, zoom, gets on that elevator, and the door closes. I'm like, oh, baby, good stuff right there. But this is way more of a deal. I mean, this is like SEC signs everywhere. They had a reception last night, which I compared on our show this morning to the Catalina wine mixer and Step Brothers. I mean, they're blasting yacht rock, and Greg Sankey's making jokes on the mic, and drinks and shrimp cocktail are flowing. But it's a very different deal, and there is still the chasing coach around, but they also actually they have a theater they go and they talk to, like they actually give you times. And of course, Sankey addressing the media, 4 straight days. Look, say what you will about Greg Sankey, and I've said some of the things about Greg Sankey. I don't approve of some of the things he's done, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says, but at least he is visible and available and willing to speak to these things. And I have to tip the cap, especially when we compare him to Tony Petitti right now.
Well, and he's always been like that. I remember an SEC basketball tournament. I was just sitting with him on press row, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to come up and do the?" This is when I was working at Sirius XM, and it was the Needle was where the studio was it's in the same arena, so it's not like a huge undertaking. But I was like, "Hey, you got a few minutes? You want to come up and do it?" And he was like, "Sure." He's always been very, very approachable, and I think it's what makes the SEC commissioners, at least Tim and Slive. I think Delaney was like this. I remember stalking Jim Delaney in the hotel of a Chicago ballroom of a Chicago hotel as well. Right as he's getting on the elevator, I was just like walking up, and I was like, "Hey, Commissioner Delaney, I'm Braden." Blah blah blah. You start chatting, and like he was very available as well. But since Delaney retired, the Big Ten has been searching for that persona. So let's start with. I want to compare the two conferences, because that's really what's happening here. We know that they're in charge of everything, and we're going to cover everything that's going on in Destin, all the different conversations and the different things that have happened. And by the way, make sure you support all of Joe's work. Go to The Athletic, and of course, 102.5 The Game in the morning with Robbie Stanley. So just Greg Sankey's message. You've had a couple of chances to hear from him. what is the message and the tone of what he is trying to get across?
Well, the first day, the tone was ACC and Big 12, Phillips, Yormark, stuff it, man. Sit on it, like Potsy. I mean, he was ticked. The suggestion of, and look, Greg Sankey, I think, is sensitive about the idea that he's the guy who's wrecked college football, right? He's the guy who's just taken a wrecking ball to it. And he has, I think, in subtle ways and maybe not as subtle at times, pointed out, like, I work for people. He's the one out taking the hits publicly. He works for people who have made some of these decisions, but
it's like Roger Goodell, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he works for the billionaires. They are the ones who, really you look at with some of the decisions. But so I think it was very much that, very much, again, defending his position, defending the SEC, but also, like after the first day and even through yesterday, I'm like, this is not just a trial balloon. Which is what I thought it had to be initially with this 4 auto bids thing, 4-4-2-2. I'm like, they're actually considering this for real. And then yesterday, the big thing to me, Braden, that came out of what he said was, and again, I think this is the coach perspective as opposed to the AD perspective. I do think that's a divide right now. He said, why can't we do the 11, the 5 and 11, right? Five autos, 11 with a 16 team. And so that, when I heard that, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I at least had some hope, because I have just been, I'm nauseated by the entire idea of 4 auto bids for those 2 leagues, especially because the Big Ten, that's a great benefit for the Big Ten. They often won't have a 4th team that we would even want to see in the playoff. ACC or the SEC will. They don't need this.
Yep.
So I felt better about the idea of at least getting away from that and getting away from the play-in game stuff on the championship weekend, which all of that stuff seems gimmicky and ridiculous to me.
Well, so this is where, like, I think 2 things can be true. First of all, and this just hit me in a very weird analogy, and I think people who listen to the show will hopefully appreciate this. I feel like Greg Sankey is in charge of a gentrifying neighborhood, and like the vast majority of the major market forces are out of his control. But within your control of a neighborhood, you have to put in place policies that mitigate the impact of gentrification. Does that make sense? And I feel like he is in charge of sort of like shepherding the conference through these things that he has no control over, like the television and alignment and realignment and NIL and Congress. Like, a lot of that shit is out of his purview. But what he can do is try to implement things to try to mitigate some of the negative consequences, or manage the direction of the development and the growth of the neighborhood or whatever. And I feel like that's what every city has to do when it grows. And I think, what do they say about cities? You'd rather be growing than dying. Those are the only 2 types. And so if you're a conference right now in college football, you're either growing or you're dying. And if you're going to grow, you're going to have to manage the growing pains. And I feel like that's his job right now. Now, what I think is interesting, because you said a lot of stuff there that I find very interesting, as you want to do. Number one, the play-in thing, I think 2 things can be true. I can be vehemently opposed to automatic qualifiers as a participation trophy for everyone. Yeah. It is insane to me that we would just, because of some random geographic alignment 100 years ago, that we are going to say that is why you are worthy of X, Y, or Z. And even just, to me, it's giving away the game by saying the Big 10 gets 4, but the Big 12 only gets 2. Like, you're giving the game away. Yeah. At that point, based on money. You've purchased slots into the playoff. That's a participation trophy. So I agree with you there. I disagree with the notion, and you're right that it's gimmicky, but I think a play-in weekend would be really good drama for the fans. I think it would be really good television, and I think it would be really exciting to have, like last year, it's like Tennessee versus South Carolina, winner gets in. And then Alabama, Ole Miss, winner gets in, loser goes home. And even if you lose, there's still maybe an at-large spot for you, but unlikely. But to have that in every conference, or at least the 2 big conferences, on a Friday and a Saturday instead of championship games that are becoming largely irrelevant, to me, that's like, well, if we're stuck with this shit, we might as well try to get something good out of it. And I do think a Saturday where teams are playing their way into the tournament, into the playoff, could be very, very interesting and fun for fans. And that's the last person who ever gets consideration in all of this stuff.
Yeah, I don't want Iowa and Minnesota to rematch 3 weeks after their boring ass game. For because you're right. You're talking the SEC, and there would be attractive matchups, and last year is a good example. The Big Ten's matchups suck. I'm sorry, like I don't want those. But
wait. No, by the way, Big Ten alumni saying this. I just want to make sure to the SEC fans here listening.
Yeah, like I'm sorry. It's like
no, it's true.
I just at this point, the state of that league is such that, and even bringing in Oregon, it's just you're going to struggle in a lot of years, I think, to once you get into 5 and 6 to have anything you want anywhere near your playoff. But I'm with you that if you were stuck with it, okay. I mean, it's better than nothing, I suppose. Again, that's why let's not be stuck with it, and then we can get rid of it, because obviously the play-in only happens if you have the auto bids, because and again, but even with that, Braden, it's like, okay, so now these special leagues that have their special access also have their special little games, and everybody else, and just you guys do whatever you want to do, have a championship game, whatever you want to do, Big 12 and ACC, you're irrelevant. I hate all of it, but
we're not there yet, but eventually they got to rip the Band-Aid off, and it's going to be all 12 regular season games are between the SEC and the Big Ten. It's going to be 45 or 44 or 46 teams, and they're going to have play-in games, and they can do whatever they want, because then all the schedules will be the same, and all the teams will be, and it'll be miniature NFL, which we don't want. I want to see Arizona State compete against Texas in a weird playoff game in Atlanta, even though I'd prefer that to be on home sites. I've talked to bowl directors. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's ever going to happen, for a number of good reasons and a number of bad ones. Cronyism and golf buddy money are the bad ones. Lack of hotel rooms and luxury suites and actual infrastructure around places like, Mississippi State, or, Boston College, hypothetically, if either of those two programs were to ever host a playoff game. I think you can figure it out, but
you can figure it out, man. There's some bad NFL stadiums, and they have the playoffs at the home, I mean,
yes, but they have but they bake in all the stuff for the money people. You know what I mean? They bake in the luxury suites. And anyway, so what I think is interesting though about this, because I feel like there's been a lot of anti-automatic qualifier conversation, because it does feel like it's like too smart by half, right? Like it's either go all the way and make it your own tournament, or do the 5 automatic qualifiers and the 11 at-larges. If you follow the money on all of this, I think it's pretty standard. If you follow the money on 16 game schedule, for those that don't know, if it expands to 14, ESPN doesn't owe them any more money. If it expands to 16, it clicks in a contract clause where they have to pay more. So the play-in games is a separate entity that in theory the SEC and the Big Ten could sell to Netflix or Apple or Amazon as a separate package. Same thing with the Big Ten SEC sort of week 0 scheduling idea as well. That could be sold separately as a package. I think there's an interesting angle here, and I think this is what Sankey's doing, and I'd be curious your perspective being down there. I think Sankey can message this as this is the Big Ten, the Big Ten, the Big Ten, and they'll take it because they can make more money and guarantee slots, but they don't really want it, and they can message this as Big Ten's doing this, the Big Ten's making this problem, and if they have to go along, they go along, but they can blame the Big Ten outwardly for this, whether they want to do it or not.
Yeah, no, but I think it's also accurate. This is the Big Ten's thing. They've been pushing it hard. Again, I'm seeing Greg Sankey talk every day. Tony Petitti apparently was available at the Big Ten thing that was out west, and 2 reporters were there. I don't know, but it's not this. But I agree with you. I also, going back to what I said earlier, the ADs and coaches. So I've talked to ADs in both of these leagues, and basically, if you combine, it's basically the same idea, which is, look, I don't like the competitive aspect of this idea, but in my budget, if I know every year I've got that 4, then I absolutely like that. And the idea of in a given year not getting it, that's tough. We are so stretched that we're trying to figure out all this stuff and keep the non-revenue sports and all that stuff. And I get that. I do. But it's just, again, especially if you're in the SEC, you're going to be fine. I think so much of this is overreaction to last year, Braden, and I don't know where you came down on SMU, Indiana.
I got no problem with what happened.
I don't either. It was close, and
don't lose 3 times.
Yeah, and I totally hear I agree that like there are plenty of 8-game SEC schedules. You can look at them and then compare that difficulty week after week to like your 9-game Big Ten. It's different. So I'm okay with them staying at 8 now. This is another thing they're trying to tell. Okay, well, we'll go to 9 if we get the auto bid. Okay, then stay at 8. Go to 7, dude. I don't care. But no auto bids. But the coaches I think are different from the ADs in feeling that way, because again, like if you're a competitor, how are you not offended by this? How do you not? Again, this is like, to me, it's like if Jerry Jones were to say, guys, we all share all the money in this league, but we know who moves the needle in this league, so we get a playoff spot every year. Thank you. I don't care what we do on the field. We get a playoff spot every year. I mean, of course he would never say that. Everybody would laugh him out, but it reminds me, it's like that kind of thinking.
Yeah, it's too smart by half. And it's very to me, participation trophy is what it is. It's like, and I'm just trying to think through the Big Ten standings last year. I forgot who was 4th place. I know Ohio State finished 3rd. So in a playoff game, you'd have like Ohio State, playing against whoever finishes 6th place, which could be. I'm trying to think again who was up there. Illinois probably was 4th, maybe. Indiana was maybe 4th. You probably have an Illinois-Indiana game that's a play-in game in there somewhere. Maybe a Michigan-Ohio State rematch, 3 versus 6. I don't know. Again, I think there are some small things that I think if we are forced to do it, I'm okay with, which, again, I would prefer a 9 or 10 game conference schedule because that is more good football for me, selfishly the fan. It's also more good football for people trying to sell season tickets and people who are buying season tickets. So that's there. That's also important. Again, would I trade that, to your point, would I trade that for this automatic qualifier garbage? No, I would prefer whatever we need to do to keep the automatic qualifiers out of this, I will give up to keep it at a 5 and 11 kind of, 5 automatics and 11 at-larges. Do I think there are some other things that, like, once we're forced to have this thing, because that's my next question, is like, how realistic do you think this is? And because all we need is Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey to agree that this is what they're going to do, and they can do it for 2026 tomorrow if they wanted to.
Yeah. No, again, I have a glimmer of hope after what Sankey said yesterday. So today is going to be really interesting in terms of just the messaging that comes. I know that the coaches meeting yesterday went way long, and so but there's a lot of stuff that they're talking about too. They're talking about the portal window and a lot of other things too. But the messaging today to me is going to be critical in terms of where things are leaning. And another point on the whole scheduling with the 8-game, 9-game, Braden. First of all, I just think that, again, last year has people overreacting. I mean, we've got Scott Strickland over here saying, well, we don't, selection committees, that doesn't work. So it's like, okay, well, then what does work, Scott? It's not the NFL. You're not just going by standings. Dust off the BCS computer. It just
the only way the standings works is if it's just Big Ten and SEC teams in all 12 regular season games. That you have to go all or nothing. You can't do this 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing.
Yeah, and I hope we never get to that. But you got to be realistic. But first of all, the selection committee, this has happened in basketball every year. Somebody has a complaint. But for the most part, we have a pretty good transparency on what they're looking at. And I still believe that, like, the select, we can make sure, not make sure, but like emphasize strength of schedule. Let's talk through that. Let's see the metrics. I mean, we can do things with the selection committee to make that a better process. Also, it's really important that we have, cross-conference, interconference good games. If not, how do we compare? I mean, we're just, the SEC must be the best. Look at the recruiting rankings. I mean, we need to have comparative games that help us compare these leagues, right? I mean,
I agree.
Lose that.
Like Auburn's going to play at Baylor in week number 1 on like a Friday night, I think. And both teams are like preseason top 30. They're both very deep. They're both going to be better this year than they were last year. And I still think you can have that game. Maybe you could keep there's also a chance that Baylor would make the cut and get lumped into like whatever 50-team breakaway could happen as well. So there's ways around some of that stuff. Again, I'm just at the point where we need to try to keep this some semblance of old college football infrastructure as long as possible, or go all the way. Like, go all the way and let's make them employees. Let's collectively bargain. Let's put a 50-team breakaway with a commissioner. Like, do the whole process. Or try to keep it as much like we've known it as possible. This in-between stuff is where it becomes gimmicky and cute, and that's where it's not recognizable as anything to me.
Is there no chance? Because look, I liked the 12 team last year. I liked it. I'd like to keep doing it, but obviously it was fun while it lasted, 12 team. But is there no chance, Braden, of having a 16 team playoff, people being happy enough with that and still economically doing the collective bargaining and slowing down the movement and sort of
I don't know.
finding a era of stability? Is there no way?
Well,
I have no idea.
Well, all of my thought has always been all of this is going to be a new generation and a new era of college football with a blown up. This whole thing's going to get blown up, and there'll be a new set of rules in around 31 or 32, 2031, 2032. That's when all the TV contracts come up. That's when the playoff contract comes out. That's when expansion and realignment can happen again. Like, that's when things legally can all happen, and you'll start hearing rumors of that, in my opinion, around 2028, 29. And then it'll take 2 years of work, and it's the same play we've seen in college football. It's just going to we're just moving the ball further down the field, for lack of a better metaphor. My issue with the 16, and I was talking about this with somebody else, that the NFL took a really long time to change its playoff structure and scheduling format. Like, it went to 16 games, I think, in like the mid 70s. And then it didn't add a 17th game until like almost 40 years later, if not 40 years later. The wild card was added, and then certainly we added another one, but that took like 30 or 35 years to change. And so once you get it set, I think you have more control over keeping it. Like, the rule changes are more difficult to implement in the NFL because of all the guiding principles. And that could happen in college football where it stabilizes, but not until you have something where, you need that in the current structure where everyone's looking out for their own neighborhood. It's not going to happen, I don't think, in the short term until you've got something long term. How possible do you think the 9-game thing is? Again, if you follow the money, the TV networks and the athletic directors are going to want more good football to sell to people. And if you follow the money on 16 games, if you follow the money on all this other stuff, it seems to point in one direction. Where are you at? What do you think is going to happen on the 9-game?
Yeah, again, they're trying to tie it to the auto bids thing. So the idea of, well, okay, if we know we have that, now we feel safe to strengthen our schedules, right? So I don't know. And another thing that Greg Sankey said yesterday, which was a little nugget that was interesting, was he said that, we have a plan. We can still preserve more of these games in an 8-game than just the one. So they've talked about it. So I think it would be wonky. It would be like some teams doing another one, right? And so then you have, it's wonky. But the fact that he said that tells me that they're
doing everything they can to avoid going to 9 games.
Yeah.
Even though they were like one Nick Saban vote away from going to 9 games like 3 years ago.
Well, and the thing is, they have Texas and Oklahoma voting now. So actually,
I guess that's
true. And they, my understanding is, are in favor of it. So I really could go either way on that. Again, if it has to be tied to the auto bids, stay at 8. But I'd love to see, like you said, more. Yeah. But can we have 9 and still everybody keep playing Texas, Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't know why not. Clemson's going to play South Carolina. Florida's going to play Florida State. Kentucky and Louisville are going to play. I think you can do it. The committee
can too.
The committee kind of has to show that they value strength of schedule, which they didn't necessarily do last year. I just think the 3 rivalries for most teams in the SEC is the right number. There's too many good ones that need to be protected, and 9 games again. I just think about 2020 on a Saturday. 2020, think about it. Forget everything else. One of the best parts of 2020 was that it was a 10-game conference slate where all you played was SEC teams every weekend. Mm-hmm. It was pretty awesome. I'm not saying I don't love the merits of, Mississippi State playing at Southern Miss or, all this other stuff. Like, I love all that stuff, but I think there's, I understand why they're probably going to stay at 8. Because
I won't be surprised at all. If they do.
Okay. All right. Tell everybody where they can find you. And are you writing off this week, I assume?
Yeah, I'm working on another story down here, but at some point I'll have a whiny column ripping everybody. Sure. So at Joe Rexrode on X. And yeah,
that's
I
Twitter
don't
for
tweet
those
a lot
of us.
anymore.
Yeah, neither do I. Neither do I. Listen to him on 102.5 The Game, of course, in the morning with Robbie Stanley. Of course, you can read him on The Athletic. Pay for good journalism and very whiny, selectively whiny tweets on what I would say is Twitter still, the artist formerly known as. Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure, my guy. Go to ML Rose, 6 great locations all across Middle Tennessee. Great craft beer, great burgers, and according to my wife, the best ranch dipping sauce in the city, Joe. The best. So there you go.
Heck yeah. I'll be out to yours soon.
I owe you some beers. Thank you, Joe Rexrode. Appreciate your time, my guy.
All right. Thanks, buddy. See ya.